Every year we always see a few new up-and-coming athletes that completely blow our minds with their times. In 2024, we saw Christian Miller from the US throw down a 9.93 in the 100 and he was just 17 at the time. In 2016, it had to be Sidi Mlaughlin as she qualified for the Olympic Games at just 16. In 2021, we saw Ariane Knighton from the US light up the track with his swift 200-meter running. But just recently, we saw a new face emerge. And even though he's already made history in various ways, including breaking his own national record at just 16, there is much more to his story than most realize. And he just might be the future of track and field. In 2025, we saw the 17-year-old Gout Gout from Australia take the sprinting world by storm. Now, if you don't remember, this is the teenager that broke his national record at the tail end of 2024, running a 200-meter dash in 24 seconds. This time actually took down the national record of Australia that went all the way back to 1968, meaning that Gout had just broken a record that had stood for more than 50 years. The news of this performance rippled throughout the entire athletics world and beyond, making news across various countries and bringing his name to the mainstream. Clearly, running this fast brought Gout Gout tons of attention from many athletics fans from around the world. But beyond just his times that he was running was his running style that got attention. When you watch Gout Gout run, you immediately realize that he might actually be born for sprinting. He looks effortless and light on his feet. His knee drive seems to lift beyond anyone else in the world. And his abilities to close over the second half of his races make him one of the most exciting runners to watch as he puts more and more distance over his competition as his races continue. Gout's 2024 season was certainly exceptional, but once 2025 came around, he officially put himself on yet another echelon of speed. For this year's running campaign, Gout significantly decreased the amount of races that he ran. In 2024, he raced a total of 41 times, and in 2025, he only raced 17 times. This decrease in overall running was certainly a successful strategy because across the board he has made incredible improvements in both the 100 and the 200m. Gout's quickest performances both broke the magical 10 and 20 second barriers as he ran a 9.99 and a 19.84 in this year's Australian National Championships. Both of these runs were pretty unbelievable. Seeing a kid at this age destroy his competition in both sprinting events was honestly some wild stuff to witness. And even though these two runs did include slightly illegal tailwinds, they still stand as his fastest overall times to date. But I think most would agree that his most impressive run was his 19.84200 time that he ran on April 13th. And this is the single race that most definitely deserves another look because even though this performance was pretty shocking at the time and even though it tied Ariane Knighton's 17-year-old world record, there were actually many aspects of this race that likely slowed him down. Now, before this race even began, we need to contextualize what exactly was happening here. For the past 3 days before this race, Gout had already raced 3 separate times with 2 races coming in the 100 meters where he ran under 10 seconds both times. And then he had a 200m qualification race where he ran a time of 20.21 seconds just a few hours before this final. This means that going into this 200, Gout likely had some fatigue resulting from his past 3 races. However, for the race itself, things got even more complicated. Now, for this 200 final, the race was initially called back because Lachlan Kennedy on the outside was unfortunately called for a false start. This meant that Gout's optimal time for racing was sadly put on hold because after a false start, this means that you have to go back to the blocks, get ready, and you ultimately have to wait a few minutes before starting again. Ask any athlete about being called back to the starting gun. It can often be quite rattling and if you don't have your wits about you, it can very much negatively affect your race. But regardless of this false start, they called the field back and were finally ready to run again. But then they actually called the race back yet again. And this time it wasn't even clear what happened. But either way, they once again had to reset and wait even longer before getting going. At this point before the start, the athletes were likely starting to cool down much more than they wanted to, meaning that they likely would not reach their optimal times. Except Gout Gout certainly thought otherwise. This 1984 was actually the result of 2 separate callbacks. But that's not even close to the worst part of this run, because when we look at the starts that Gout had on the day, it begins to be painful when you realize what it actually means. Now, for the first call back, Gout actually got out of the blocks with a solid reaction. He didn't lose any ground on his competitors, and he more or less was set to go super fast here. Now, for the second call back, it was the exact same story. He got a solid start and did not lose any ground. But unfortunately, and I think you might know where I'm going with this, for the third installment of this start that ultimately led to his 1984, Gout had a fairly bad reaction to the gun as he lost a noticeable amount of ground to his competitors. This might not look like that bad of a start. In fact, it's barely visible in normal time, but in the 200m or the 100m, it can result in a significant loss, often up to a full tenth or even 0.15 seconds. At 1984 with 2 callbacks and this start, Gout honestly outperformed any kind of time that he should have run in these circumstances. And with all of these factors pushed together, we often forget to look at one key part of this race that I don't think anyone's looked at yet, and that is the analysis of his 100-meter splits. Now, unfortunately, there's no exact split times that have been available as of yet, as the starting gun is not available, and the sound of the gun is barely noticeable. But there are ways that we can look at the times that he likely ran. And in order to do this, we just need to put together some basic logic. Given his slower start, Gout's opening 100 was likely not comparable with many of his better starts that he has had. And if we look at this year's World Championships in Tokyo, we can see that he had some fairly decent starts by his standards, as he achieved an opening 100 split of 10:59 in the opening heats, and then he had an even quicker opening 100 in the semis at 10:55. Now, Gout was also clocked much quicker at this year's Monaco Diamond League meeting, as his opening 100 was achieved in 10:41 seconds, followed by a close of 9:69 seconds. Now, if we assume that Gout's start was somehow comparable to a start to the World Champs, let's say he went out for the opening 1:10:50, then his final 100 would be right at 9:34, which would be consistent with races in the past, as he was clocked at 9:34 for his final 100 when he broke the national record at 20:04. However, given his slow start, the odds are that his opening 100 was slower. And if we look at the possibilities of his split times given this slower reaction, the split times start to become ridiculously quick. If Gout ran a time of 10:60 for his opening 100, which does seem quite plausible, then his final 100 would be measured at 9:24. And if his opening 100 was even slower at 10:65, which would also be reasonable, then his final 100 would be the equivalent of 9:19 seconds. Now again, there is an asterisk next to this performance, as the wind was certainly assisting him in his run, as it was measured just over the allowable limit. But either way, this was objectively one of the most impressive closes that I have seen in recent memory. And if Gout went out in, let's say, between 10:05 and 10:06, this would mean that he closed anywhere between 924 and 9:34. And based on the history of the 200, this would place him as one of the top 10 fastest closers in 200-meter history. But believe it or not, this is actually not the most impressive part of this race. Because after careful analysis, experts have found that for this final 50m, Gout achieved the single fastest close in the history of track and field, as he was clocked right at 4:60 seconds. This time is even faster than Johan Blake's legendary close from the 2011 Diamond League meeting, where he ran as 19:26, and the fact that a 17-year-old did this is nothing short of sensational. Everything about this performance was just iconic. From being called back twice to having a slow start and getting out still pretty solid. But then to close like this with such poise and such determination certainly makes Gout the athlete to look for in the future. And now I would love to hear from all of you about this special athlete. What do you think about Gout's potential in the future? What do you think about his times that he'll achieve in the 100 and in the 200? And also looking forward to the 2028 Olympics and the 2032 Olympics. How do you think he will do given that the 2032 Olympics will be in Brisbane, aka his own backyard? Thanks for watching everyone. Until next time.